All right, everybody, I am so excited to get started on this month's creation. We are making a mini loaf kitty, and here is the example that I have for this month. Don't make fun of my face, please. I'm terrible at doing faces. But this is what we're creating, and hopefully your face turns out a little better. If it does, drop me a picture in the comments so I can see how much better your little face turns out. But this is the example of what we're making this month, a little loaf kitty. I don't know if you've seen them before on YouTube or if you've looked up any other crochet tutorials, but this is what we're doing. Here's what the pattern looks like. I've written it up so that you can check off each row as we're going through it. And these are the extra rows as we go through the midsection on the body. There's a few extra rows, so there's spots to check those off. If you have any questions about what each of these things mean, I'm going to work through it, but please check out my previous tutorials. I talk through what all of these mean, the MC magic circle increase, but all of this means. So if you're confused at all, please look at previous tutorials. For this month, we've been working up to this point. We've been teaching exactly how to do all of these things. And now this is the culmination of everything we've learned. We're going to make this beautiful little amigurumi loaf kitty. So let's get started. All right, the things that we will need for today: a hook, some yarn in a contrasting color. That can be whatever you want, at least for the whiskers. If you plan on using safety eyes, you'll need some safety eyes as well. A stitch marker of some kind. You can also use some yarn, and I'm going to show you how to do that. A hook, yarn, and a darning needle or a yarn needle. Depending on the size yarn that you're using, your hook will change. And let me show you a trick, a really simple trick for choosing your yarn and your hook size. You don't for amigurumi, you want your hook to be smaller than what it says the recommended yarn size is on the package, or if you're looking on the yarn package, you want your hook to be generally 1 to 2 sizes smaller than what it says on the package. But this is an easy way to gauge that if you're doing amigurumi. The reason we want it smaller than what it says on the package is because you want your stitches tight enough that the stuffing won't come through. There's no holes and you won't be able to see it, because generally amigurumi gets played with. They're toys, right? So we don't want the stuffing to come out too quickly. This is my easy hack for gauging that pretty quickly. The yarn and the hook are about the same size, meaning they come about the same. Sometimes you'll end up with yarn that comes a little bit lower like that. That means your hook is too big. You need to go down a hook size. Let me show you an example of that. Some different things you might run into, okay? For example, here is a much smaller hook. And if I were to do this hook is way too small for this yarn. I will be constantly, what would happen if I tried to stitch with this is I would constantly be grabbing only half of the yarn, and it would split and I would be pulling only half of it through, and that would be very frustrating. The other thing that can happen is this is a much larger hook. This, if I were to use a much larger hook, which this is probably closer to the recommended size on this package of yarn. And if you were stitching up a blanket or something like that, or a garment, this would be totally fine. But when you're doing amigurumi, because there is so much extra space, the yarn will, or not the yarn, but the fiber fill will come through. You'll see lots of holes, and it would be less fun because over time you would start to lose your fill. So you want your, where's my 3.5? You want your yarn to look a bit like this, for it to be very in line with the hook that you're using. All right, that's an easy trick. That's my handy dandy trick for choosing yarn and hook size when you're stitching with amigurumi. All right, let's get started. We're gonna start with a magic circle of 8 stitches this time instead of 6. We have almost exclusively started with a magic circle of 6. This time we're going to start with magic circle of 8. I'll go through this slowly one last time, but I have several videos of magic circles. So please look back at any of those if you are confused or you need it to go a little bit slower. one trick that I will tell you with a magic circle, and I think I've said this before, but when you are stitching with a magic circle, it is really important that your circle be kind of tight, because if you have a loose circle, it is very difficult with a loose circle to get your stitches. And I see this a lot in teaching circumstances where you get the magic circle, you get it, you've done it, you've got the knot, but then you leave it loose. And it's really hard to get into the circle, to grab those stitches, to pull it through properly, and to get a nice stitch if you're not holding the circle tight. So if you can, practice holding your yarn and hold the circle nice and tight. This tension is important. That way, when you go in to grab that yarn and pull up, you'll notice I've got some tension on my circle. It's easy to get those stitches. It's easier to get those initial stitches because there's a little bit of tension in the circle itself. You'll notice this part right here especially, I'm pulling on it because that's what helps me pull these initial stitches through. So this is 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I'm going to leave the hook in place while I tighten my circle here. I'm going to stretch it just a little bit, and I want to leave a little bit of room right at the end there, because when I go in this first one, when you're going in to get that first stitch to close your circle, this first stitch can be a little tight, and that is completely normal that it's a little bit tight. Remember, we don't do a full stitch. We're going to do a slip stitch here to close our circle. And I'm gonna, like I said, this is normally a little bit tight, so that is normal. And if it takes a couple tries, that's normal. All right, I want to get this nice and through so it's loose, it's good. Slip stitch to close. Now we can go ahead and tighten the rest of that circle up. All right, there is our magic circle of 8. We're going to start there. I'm going to take my pen and check that off. That is row 1. All right, and row 2, we're going to do an increase 8 times. At the end of that row, we should have 16 stitches at the end of that row. An increase means that we're putting 2 stitches in each of our original stitch spaces. Let's do that together. Remember, this is our slip stitch space right here. So the next stitch space is actually going to be this one over here. So this is our first stitch space. So we're going to go 1, and then we're going to put another one, a second one, directly back into that same stitch space. That's an increase when we put 2 stitches into the original stitch space. But I'm going to count this before I move on. This has a stitch in it. You can see those are pulling. This next one doesn't, so we're going to start here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That means if we add 2 stitches to this next one, it'll be 16. Right now it's 15 because there's only 1 stitch in that place. So if we make that 1 stitch 2, we'll go from 15 stitches to 16, which is what we need. All right, so starting row 3, anything you see in the parentheses means we're going to repeat that the number of times that it says to repeat, so 8 times. In this case, we're also just going to do it till the end of the row. So we're going to do 1 single crochet and 1 increase until the end of the row, which will be 8 times, and at the end we should have 24 stitches. All right, so this first stitch is going to be a single. So there's our 1, and then we're going to put an increase. 1, 2. So for me, here's 1, 2, 3. There's 1, 2, 3. So this one goes into this stitch. 1, 2, 3. All right. Whoop. And let's keep following that pattern all the way around. So a single in this next one, and then an increase, which means we put 2 stitches, a single in the next one, and an increase in the next one. A single and an increase. Single and an increase. You can see if you ever have to pause like that, you can see where you stopped. So I see 2 stitches in that one. So my next one is going to be a single and then an increase, a single, and an increase. And if we did it right, we have 2 stitches left, which means a single and an increase. That's another way to sort of checks and balances if you're doing the pattern correctly or if you're ending the way that you should. So we are ending on an increase as we should, but let's count. It's always good to count at the end of, I'm going to move this into this place. That'll be our first stitch, and then I'm going to count here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And then you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect, 24 stitches. Excellent. So we completed row 3 and we ended with the number of stitches that we were supposed to have. Okay, so I wanted to show you how to use yarn as your stitch marker. This one is a little bit thick and could distort the size of my stitches. Yarn is actually really nice because it's not going to distort the size of your stitch, and you can leave it in on that first stitch. So I just wove the yarn through, just threaded it through that initial stitch. Then I can put my hook through. I'm just going to kind of pull it down into the side, so when I cinch that stitch down, it doesn't get in the way. This row right here, row number 4, we're starting with 5 single crochets. So here we go. Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you'll see if you're using yarn, it just weaves right into that stitch, so you know exactly where you started. It doesn't distort that stitch at all. If I were using this one, if I had left it in during that first one, it would kind of distort this stitch because it's a little bumpier, it's a little thicker. The yarn as a stitch marker doesn't, so yarn makes a great stitch marker. All right, let's move on to the next one. So we did our 5. Just going to check this off. Sometimes I get a little distracted in the middle, and it's nice to know exactly what I'm doing. Now we're going to chain 7. In this stage, we are making the tail. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's our chain right there. Let's read the next part. So starting in the second chain from the hook, we're going to do 6 single crochets down the chain. We can't crochet in this very first chain on the hook. It gets a little, it basically is the stitch that we're currently in. So it gets a little funky and it's a little hard to do. So almost always when you're crocheting off of a chain, you start in the second chain from the hook, which is this chain right here. We did this last month with our flowers. We did a lot of this, so you should be well practiced. That's our first single crochet. Now we're going to move into the second stitch down the chain, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're going to slip stitch into the same single crochet that we started with. And the easiest way to see which one that is to kind of pull it up, and you'll see the stitch that you started with tug a little bit. That's the stitch that we want to go back into. Pull your yarn up and through, but do not loop around. We're not going to do that. We're going to take this loop that's on your chain, or that's on your hook, and you're going to pull it straight through. That's a slip stitch, and that's your little tail. And then the next part of this is to single crochet 19, and that should bring us back around to our stitch marker where we started. All right, so the next stitch then is going to be this one right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. And there we are back at the beginning. The stitch marker is in the first stitch of the row. So we ended exactly where we should be. And there is our little tail. Okay, so this next row is a little bit tricky because we have to go around the tail. But I'm going to show you right here. We go from this stitch right here to this stitch right here. This one right here. This one here to this one here. We're going to go around the front of that one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, here's 5. Now we're going to jump around the front of the tail. And we're going to pull this stitch a little extra tight. So right here before you pull it through, pull it a little extra tight because we want to close off that stitch. 6, 7, 8. Okay, did you guys see what we did there? So we went from that stitch to that one. We kind of closed off the tail. Let's count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, last stitch, 24. So it looks a little scrunched right there. You really only did cross 2 stitches. When we did our tail, when we put it in, we really only crossed 2 stitches. So those are the 2 stitches we're making up for. It is the same space. All right, the reason we pull it tight is so there's not a gap. So there's no gap for the fluff to come through when we finish it in the end. All right, if you want to take the chance right now to pull this a little bit tighter to kind of close that magic circle a little bit more, you can. All right, and that was the end of row 5. So we will cross row. All right, and now we're going to start row 6. I know some of you are not a fan of the bobble, but they do make these adorable little feet on the bottom. So this is what we're working on right now, is the row that includes the back feet bobbles. It is really important that we count our stitches because the placement of the bobbles is important in terms of the stitch count. So let's count 14. I went ahead and pulled my stitch marker and already replaced it. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I'm going to pause here and make sure that I have enough yarn pulled out so that I'm not tugging at all during this next step, because it will use a little bit of extra yarn. So I'm going to just make sure I'm very prepared for the bobble. All right, and then the bobble starts a little bit like, I'm so sorry, I keep hitting my camera, you guys. It's very close to me for some reason today. The bobble starts a little like a half double crochet. So we yarn over once before we start it. Then we insert, grab our yarn and pull through, yarn over, but we're only going to pull through the first 2, not all the way through. Then we're going to repeat that, I think 4 more times. So we yarn over again, insert into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up, and again only through the first 2. Now we have 3. We're going to do this again until we have I think it's 7 on the hook. I'll show you. So we yarned over again, pull through, yarn over, pull through just the first 2. Now there's 4, yarn over, pull through just the first 2. Now there's 5. The next time we're going to pull all the way through, yarn over, pull through. Now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This time we're going to yarn over. I would recommend you pause here, give this a nice wiggle before you start pulling all the way through all of them. It'll make that final pull through a little bit easier. And then take a second here to sort of push out and make your little bobble foot look a little bit nice before you move on. So 1, 2, just gonna stitch through that knot, 3, 4, try that again. 4. And then remember, we start with a yarn over first until we have 7. So yarn over through the first 2, yarn over, pull through just the first 2, yarn over and insert again. So this is 3 yarn over and inserts. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then through all of them. And go slowly with this. Don't try to pull them all through at once. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to take it sort of one at a time. All right, and then we are going to single crochet 4. One, 2, 3, and 4. And that's it for that row. That is row 6. All right, the next 4 rows are all the same thing. We're doing rows of just single crochet, 24 each row. All of those rows. Now we are on to row 11, and we're going to do the front feet bobbles. So we've just completed the whole body, and now we're doing the front. So let's do a single crochet. We're going to do 16. 1, 2, 3. The reason it's different than the back feet is because your stitches move ever so slightly. You can see they're not exactly perfectly straight. They shift ever so slightly as you crochet. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Oof, got my stitches tight. 15, 16. And you'll see now this next stitch is in line with our first bobble. Let's do it. We yarn over first, insert, bring up, yarn over, and only through the first two. Yarn over, insert, through the first two. Yarn over, pull up, only through the first two. Yarn over, insert through the first two. This is our last one. We're going to pull it all the way through. Give it a little wiggle. And then pull through slowly. And then take a second to realign those stitches so you got a nice little bobble. Pull it tight before you go into your next stitch. And this time we're going to do a single crochet of 4, and remember that next stitch is real tight next to this one, so we're inserting into this stitch right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, yarn over, insert, pull up, just 2, yarn over, insert, pull up, just 2, yarn over, insert, pull up, just 2. Rinse and repeat. And this next one's going to be our last one, and we're going to pull all the way through. Pause and give it a wiggle. And then take it a little at a time. Wiggle out that nice bobble, and then we've got a single crochet of 2. So there's your first one, 1. Give it a nice tug, so that's a nice tight first one. 1 and 2. And there we go. All right, and that is row 11. All right, this one might look a little complicated. It's not. I promise we will get through it. So the first thing we're going to do, take it one step at a time. Single crochet 5. This is why a stitch marker is really important in this pattern. Some patterns are less important, but this one is really important. 1, 2, 3, insert, 4, 5. Now what we're going to do, and remember I said everything within the parentheses is all going to be either repeated or in the same stitch, and in this case it's in the same stitch, and what we're working on right now is the ear. FLO means front loop only. And remember, when we're looking at stitches, we have, going to get everything out of the way here. We have both a front loop when you're working. There's the loop that faces you, and the back loop, the loop that faces the inside of the project. So this is the front loop. So when we are stitching, we are going to only pick up the front loop. So we're going to insert, rather than going through both, then we'd have both on the hook. Front loop only means we just pick up only the front loop. This is a double crochet, so we're going to yarn over before we insert into that front loop, pull up, then we yarn over again. We go through only 2 loops, yarn over, and 2 loops again. That's a double crochet. Then we're going to chain 2, 1, 2. Then we are going to do a slip stitch in the second chain from the hook. Again, not this first top one right here, but this one. So we're going to insert our hook into this one, grab the yarn. Sometimes you can pull straight through right here, but I find it easier to just grab the yarn that's currently on your hook and pull it over. That's a personal preference thing. So slip stitch in the second chain from the hook, and then we're going to do another double crochet in that same exact stitch. So we yarn over again into that same front loop only. We're still in front loop. Pull up, yarn over through the first two, yarn over, and pull through both of those again. Now we're going to single crochet 4. So this is the stitch that we've been currently working in. So this is going to be our next stitch. Can you guys see that? This is our current stitch. So this is the next stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And just to pause to show you what that looks like. So what we created is a really cute little triangle. Really adorable little kitten ear. It's all in one stitch though. There's a whole bunch of stitches up here, but down at the base, this only took 1 stitch space. So we go to stitch around the next round. This is a stitch, right? This is one. And then this is one here. You'll see when we come around again. All right, we're going to repeat the same pattern, front loop only, double crochet. So we're going to yarn over first. We're going to go just into that front loop only, pull over, yarn over, go through just the first 2, yarn over, and the second 2, double crochet 2 actions, 2 loops, 2 actions, chain 2, 1, 2, then we're going to slip stitch into that second chain from the hook, so not the first one but the second one. So we insert our hook, pull up. You can either try to pull it straight through like that, or you can take it and do it like I did the first time. Then we're going to yarn over and go into the same loop, pull it over, yarn over only through the first 2, yarn over, and second 2. Think 2 loops, 2 actions for a double crochet. All right, and then at the end of this, we're going to single crochet 13, and that's just going to take us back around to our stitch marker at the beginning. So this is the stitch we're working in. So this is our next stitch. This is our front loops. Here is our next stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're working with these bobbles. So we've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. All right, we did it. I know that row was a little tough, but we did it. Okay, so this next row can get a little complicated figuring out where to go around our ears, kind of like when we did with the tails. So what I wanted to do is take a minute to show you with some stitch markers, the stitches that we're going to be going into before I actually start crocheting it. Because it's just a little confusing. Confuses me, so it might confuse you. Okay, so when we are coming around, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 5. We're going to go into stitch 6 here, and then we're going to go, our next stitch is going to be this one here. So let's start doing that so you can see what this looks like. Again, the goal is 24 stitches. So 1, 2, 3. I always do 3 in my stitch marker. Okay, 3, 4, 5. Oh, not through there. 5, and we're going to go into that next one. So I'm going to go ahead and take this marker out. Maybe. In to this next stitch. So 6 stitches. Then we are going to, because that's this stitch, so it doesn't really look like it, but this 6 that we're going into, that's this stitch where all of this happened. That's stitch 6. Then we're skipping over to the next stitch, which is going to be this one here. And I'm going to go ahead and take that marker out. I recommend, if you think you're going to have any difficulty with it, use some stitch markers ahead of time and count to make sure that you're going to have 24 stitches at the end of the row before you start stitching, before you start the row, so that you don't get all the way done with it and you end up coming up short or have too many stitches. 2, 3, 'Remember, we put 4 stitches in between. So here I'm taking out the stitch marker on stitch 4. And then I'm looping around to the next stitch after that, and I'm tucking our ears and cinching it. Ooh, I'm losing my yarn. There we go, cinching it a little bit to get that nice and tight through there. You can always use yarn rather than stitch markers if you need to. And then we're just going all the way back around to our stitch marker on this one, because this row is just 24 around. But I wanted to show you a trick for figuring out how to go around those ears and where that ear placement is. Take a minute, look at your ear placement, and then count your stitches before you go around. That way you don't have to do it and pull it out. And then when you get to the end of the row, just to make sure you've done it right, I'm going to pull this, replace my stitch marker, and then I'm going to double check my work, make sure that I did that correct, and count my stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. All right. And that's going to be row 13. We did it. All right. So to make sure that we have a nice flat face, same as we have a nice flat back, we're going to decrease really rapidly. So kind of like we increased with a single and an increase on the front, we're going to do a single and a decrease on the back, and then we're going to do a single and a decrease on the front. So here is a single. I do decreases with the front loops only. You can do a decrease with the whole stitch if you want to. that was only 2 stitches versus my normal 3, but I don't want to get confused. So I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker in there. And we're just going to do this the whole way around. So single, and a decrease. Go around the ear there. I'm going to make sure I pull that nice and tight. Again, thinking of the fluff a little bit later. And then our decrease is going to be here. Single. Decrease. Single. And decrease. Single. And a decrease. Single. And a decrease. And our final single and decrease. And now we're going to pause and start to fill with fluff. After I get this stitch marker moved. All right, now we're going to add some fluff up here, and I'm going to pack this guy pretty firmly. The yarn that I'm working with is fairly flexible yarn. So this is where I'm going to stop right now. And I'm just going to push it a little away from the edges of the opening so I can stitch without that getting in the way. And the next one, we're going to do a decrease of 10. This is going to go past the round marker. So I'm actually going to go ahead and take my round or my stitch marker out. Because at this point we're closing off the piece. So we're going to do past what our stitch marker would have been, or past where our round marker would have been. That's because we want to very quickly and rapidly close this circle. So we're going to do 10 decreases all in a row. Right, so here's 1. And I want to keep these pretty tight, so I'm going to keep cinching them down. 2. 3. And you'll notice where your stitch or where your yarn is coming into, it's easy to think that this is the next stitch, but you'll see this one is. It's sometimes easy to think that this is the stitch you want to go into. It's the next one. Sometimes when you're doing a whole bunch of decreases, it can get easy to get mixed up and go into the stitch that you've just decreased into. So just be aware of which stitches you're going into. go ahead and leave about that much. I'm going to go ahead and fasten off. And before I pull this all the way out, I'm actually going to kind of loosen that a little, and I'm going to add a little bit more stuffing in there. And I'm just going to kind of work it in. Otherwise the face will be a little bit flat. And I overstuffed it a little bit previously because I want to make sure that this, that he's stuffed well enough. So then I will typically take it and sort of give it a roll. And the overstuffing that I did before now fills out the rest of the piece pretty nicely. There we go. Now he doesn't feel overstuffed, he feels nicely stuffed. And I'll go ahead and pull this out, and I'll show you how to close this gap. Okay, so we're going to take our darning needle now. And what you want to do on these last couple stitches to close this off really nicely, just going to kind of push that in there. You want to go in and grab the back loop, not the whole stitch, just the back loop of the next couple stitches. And you don't have to pull tight yet. We'll pull it tight in just a second. I'm going to go just the next, what was that, 4 stitches? And now we're going to go ahead and pull that. And then I'm going to go into this stitch and then down and through, out through the back side. And then pull that. I don't know what this, somehow I've ended up with a little loop here. So I'm going to pull this back up because I'm not sure, I don't want that loop. So I'm going to pull this up. And I'm going to just going to put this down in a different place. If you end up with like a little funky spot right there like I did, you can just pull what you had back up and put it down in a different spot so you don't have that sort of funky rise right there. Generally speaking, in crochet, whatever you've done can be undone. Looks like I just caught a stitch kind of funny. I'm going to go under that stitch. There we go. Now I've got a nice flat front for my face. And then I always give this a little extra tug, clip it close, and then it'll pull back down into the piece. All right. And then we just kind of adjust everything. And then we'll get ready to put our face on. Okay, so we just finished making the body of our piece, and I want to show you how to make the eyes, and then we're going to put in the whiskers. This is the eyes that we're going for, and I wanted to show you what they look like first, and then I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to show you how to make them. If you make a mistake, I want to show you the pulling out process. You can take your darning needle or your yarn needle, and you just go under and very gently pull the yarn back through. This is easier to do with your hand than with any kind of accessory. The only thing is you want to use your needle to go very gently under and sort of get that initial pull, and then pull it through. You'll feel which way the yarn is pulling from, and then pull very gently in that direction. You can use this technique if you've ever pulled your eyes or whatever, you know, feature you're making. If you've pulled it too tight, you can go underneath and kind of give it a little bit of breath, a little bit of space. I'm using it this time to just pull this out to show you how we achieved those eyes in the first place. Okay, so when I was looking at the front of our little kitty here, this is the circle that we closed off with. I want to do 2 rows of eyes on either side of that center circle. So that's kind of the parameters that I'm working with. When you're stitching in a face, you don't want to start from right where the face is. You want to start from back here, and I'll show you why in just a minute when we finish it off. But that's what we're going to start with. So take a second when you're sort of assessing a piece, take a second to sort of look first where you want things to go. Then you are going to thread. Start from farther back in your piece and come forward. I know I want 2 stitches, so I'm going to start by coming through this, this one, yep, this one. I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail back here, and then I wanted to go through this one, and I'm going to loop it into the same stitch that I went through the first time. And I'm not going to pull it very tight. Then I'm going to go back into that stitch and out of the next stitch that I want to go into on the other side. And that's going to create that double look on this side. And then over here, I'm going to try and find, so there's 1 row, 2 rows. So I want to go into this one, and then just like we did on the first side, we're going to come out of the first stitch that we went into to create that double layer look, and then pause and see if that's how you want it to look. That looks really good. This time when I go into this stitch, I'm going to come out of the stitch that I went into back here. And again, I'm not going to pull it very tight. Make sure that looks how I want it to look. That looks good because I'm going to kind of use this little circle as the nose. And I think actually I wanted to maybe be a little bit closer, but I like how that looks. I'm going to do some little whiskers here. So I'm going to leave that. So I'm going to go ahead and take my needle off. Down here, I'm going to take these 2 pieces. This is why I left a little tail. I'm going to put a gentle knot. I'm not going to pull it tight, because if I pull this tight, this eyeball will pull extra tight, or that eye stitch, and I don't want that stitch to pull tight. So I'm going to tie, and I'm going to put another knot here, and then I'm going to clip this really short. There we go. And then you can use your hook right here, or you can use a pen or pencil, anything that you have. Okay, there we go. I was trying to tuck it into the wrong hole. There we go. So you tuck it into the stitch hole. And then just kind of swoosh that over, and that becomes invisible. That knot gets buried into your piece. There we go. That's why we do it back here, so we can sort of tie it off and tuck it in. Now we're going to add the whiskers. Okay, so to add the whiskers, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut a length of yarn. Thread that. And we're going to start from the back, just like we did before. This is random. You can pick anywhere that you want to start. But again, I want to start from sort of this nose point that I've created with these closing stitches. So I'm aiming for this stitch right here. And I think this kitty, I'm going to pull this pretty far through because we have a few whiskers to make. I think this kitty has got some pretty crazy whiskers. So we're going to go pretty far out with that one. We're going to give them some exaggerated whiskers. And you'll see I looped it back through here because that's going to be the center point of all of our whiskers. So we're going to come back to that center stitch each time. Maybe we'll make this third whisker a little bit shorter. Oh, slipped off my needle. Okay. And from here, we're going to go back through that stitch under to the, same stitch on the other side. Make sure it looks relatively balanced. And then we're going to create our other set of whiskers. Let's see. This is where I struggle a little bit because sometimes I struggle with just seeing the bounce. So sometimes I turn things upside down so I can see a little bit better. See, I think that works. Then we'll put another one right here. Sometimes I'll use my needle to kind of help me determine where I need to go. All right. Now what we're going to do, I said we were going to use this as our nose. We are, but we're going to finish it off with a few extra stitches. So now that we've got our whiskers in, I'm going to go into that first stitch that we used as our whisker stitch on this side. What we're going to do is add a few stitches across that nose area. Just a couple. To sort of be our little nose. There we Not sure I love that last one we did. That one went a little crooked. So I'm gonna pull this one out. Oops. This is why I use the needle, because sometimes if I was trying to do this with my fingers, I think I would end up, well, I know I would end up accidentally pulling more than I mean to. There we go. And then I'm going to take this one and I'm going to link it up with where we started. So I'm going to put this one back through here and come out in that same starting stitch, and we'll tie it off and tuck it in just like we did with our little eyes. There we go. Oops. So I ended up with more yarn than I needed to, but more is better than less. So always better to cut off excess than to have not enough. So we'll give that a little tie. Give this a little tie. Off the excess. Push that down into the stitch. There we go. There's our little loaf cap. All right, everyone, we did it. This crochet class has been an absolute blast to teach. Thank you for letting me teach you crochet amigurumi. These are a couple different faces that we made. This one I was working on just a different eye type. You can always use safety eyes if you want to. I hope you enjoyed taking classes with North Central Washington Library, and it has been an honor to teach you. Hopefully we'll see you next year. We are going to learn how to crochet a dragon together starting next year. So stay tuned for more crochet lessons with North Central Washington Libraries. Hope you guys have an awesome rest of your summer, and we'll see you next time.